Well, today marks the one-year anniversary of the arrest and continued detention of two Canadians in China. Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor now face the possibility of a trial in China on national security charges after their case was apparently sent to prosecutors this week. The arrest and detention of the two men is widely seen as retaliation for Canada's arrest and detention of Huawei tech executive Meng Wanzhou in Vancouver. She faces extradition to the U.S. to face fraud charges there. In Ottawa today, the House of Commons spent the day debating a Conservative motion calling for the creation of a special parliamentary committee to examine Canada's rocky diplomatic relationship with China. From the foyer of the House of Commons tonight, I'm joined by three members of Parliament. They are Ontario Liberal MP Arif Virani. Erin O'Toole is an Ontario Conservative MP and the Foreign Affairs critic for the official opposition. And Jack Harris is a Newfoundland and Labrador New Democrat MP and his party's Foreign Affairs critic. Good to see you all, gentlemen. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
I'm going to get to China in just a moment, but Arif Virani, just before we talk about that, let me ask about the new reworked trade deal concluded today between Canada, the U.S. and Mexico. This paves the way for ratification now. The Democrats in Washington seem to have obtained what Canada couldn't, namely better protections for workers, the environment, and affordable prescription drug prices. So let's start there. Why is this a good deal for Canada?
Well, it's a good deal for Canada because it provides us with trade certainty, and I think that's what Canadian markets and Canadian businesses want to see. I think that's what our American and Mexican allies want to see. And what I would say is, in terms of the provisions that you're mentioning, yes, a very good deal just got improved today, and that's a good thing. But when we go back to where NAFTA was prior to Ms. Freeland and the Prime Minister getting involved, we didn't have enforceable labor provisions. We didn't have provisions respecting the environment. We didn't have mentions of Indigenous people, references to women, for example. So those are all things that were started by Canada, and we've seen that torch carried forward. And some improvements were made today, but what's important is that we're having some finality. So it's a good day for Canada and a good day for Canadian business.
Erin O'Toole, have we got the right trade deal for Canada?
Absolutely not. In fact, today was a diminished deal. In fact, the reports in the U.S. said Canada conceded on all elements in this negotiation. It's not a good day for thousands of people in directly the aluminum industry in Quebec and in the supply networks around it. In fact, Mexican auto assembly will take Chinese aluminum, which is created with coal-burning forges and factories. So this is bad for Canada, bad for workers, bad for the environment. And all of the provisions my friend Arif just mentioned on Indigenous issues and the range of progressive issues are non-binding, aspirational, nice language. So we lose on the substantive elements related to jobs in the economy, and we put in these sort of, nice symbolic measures that don't actually have any teeth behind them. So it was once again a bad deal for Canada.
Mr. Harris, what's the view of the NDP?
Well, first of all, I think it's ironic that workers in Canada had to rely on Democrats in the United States to get these labour and environment protections that they believed we should have had. And, back 3 or 4 months ago when we were demanding that there be labour and environment protections there, we were told that we didn't know how this really worked. This was a deal that was fixed in stone, couldn't be changed, couldn't be fixed. And here we are today celebrating the fact that the fixes that we wanted are actually have been put together thanks to the pressure by the Democrats in the U.S. So that's a very interesting take on it. We did know that this had to be changed and should have been changed, and we're glad to see those changes. The devil is in the details, however. We'll wait and see what comes before the House.
Right, still lots of study to be had. Now let's talk about China. And Erin O'Toole, let me start with you. The day-long debate in the House of Commons. Why are you proposing this special parliamentary committee to dig into the relationship between Canada and China?
Well, certainly from the first days of the Trudeau government, when their transition team was headed up by the president of the Canada-China Business Council, there's been questions about the Prime Minister. We joke about his admiration for the basic dictatorship, but if you looked at them greenlighting some transactions with state-owned enterprises of security companies, the Pentagon, our Five Eyes allies have questioned this sort of pro-Beijing approach of the Trudeau government from the very start. And then, of course, after the 19th People's Congress in China, when state-owned enterprises were more of an extension of the Chinese state than ever before, the Prime Minister refused to make decisions on Huawei. We saw the arrest of Canadian citizens, export disruption. So there's security, defense, trade, human rights, a range of issues that really need to be explored in a special committee that will also allow it to be in camera, Peter, at times to protect sensitive information for consular issues or for national security, but to make sure that Canadians know that this is being handled in a serious and professional way and that Canadian values are not sacrificed with pursuit of economic gain with the potential of markets in China.
Mr. Virani, where do the Liberals stand on this proposal from the Conservatives? Are you in favour of a special parliamentary committee to examine the relationship with China?
We are not in favor of it, and there's very specific reasons why. One is because we need to be of utmost prioritization with the concerns and the confidentiality and the privacy interests of the families that are involved. That has to be our fundamental concern, as it remains so. We also are not in the habit of striking special committees to deal with particular international relationships. We have parliamentary friendship groups, we have parliamentary associations for that. Committees are the masters of their own destiny, particularly in a minority parliament situation. This can be handled at committees, and we don't litigate or air out in public forum sensitive matters such as consular cases. And the reasons why we don't is because there are very significant security and privacy matters at stake that would jeopardize the likelihood of succeeding in the case and getting it done expeditiously, which is why we don't pursue it in that forum.
Mr. Harris, do the Democrats support this idea?
We support the idea of ensuring that there are other voices at the table, not just the government that's been in place, obviously, for the last number of years. While these relationships deteriorated, and so far, obviously, we haven't had success in dealing with the issue of the individuals under arrest and incarcerated for over a year, plus all the other things that have happened since then. We have an important relationship with China, and we've seen the damage that they can do. We've got to improve that, and I think Canadian voters said to us, said to Mr. Trudeau and his government, you need some help here. You're not going to have all the power. This is an example where we can bring something to the table that could improve the situation, because we're going to have relations with China for the long term. We now have an opportunity perhaps to try and set it on the right course. We should hear all the voices. This is a good way to do it. It's a collaborative approach. There are protections, as Erin has pointed out. We don't have to do all of this in public, and it's not the same as a committee, because there's several committees that have various pieces of this. This is an important thing, and I think if we do it together, it's a good thing.
Mr. O'Toole, China pays very close attention to what's happening in countries and what people are saying about it. How concerned are you that this kind of a committee, to Mr. Virani's point, to put China under a bit of a microscope could actually make matters worse for the two Michaels being held in China now?
It'll actually make things better, because it will show that we significantly value the relationship. Other countries have had special congressional or parliamentary examinations of the Chinese relationship. Peter, I think all Canadians know that China is the second largest economy. It is a world power today. How Canada engages with China in balancing the economic opportunities with the challenges, with human rights concerns, a range of things, is the challenge of our generation on a foreign affairs front. And they don't have confidence in Prime Minister Trudeau on the foreign affairs front. So this allows a minority parliament to seize itself of looking at all these things. It actually protects the information of complex consular cases because it can be in camera and secret. We have an obligation to show Canadians that all parliamentarians care about the well-being of the Michaels. So if we were not asking any questions, Peter, we would not be doing our job. So actually sending this to a specialized committee where we can take the politics out of it is better. And the only reason the Liberals don't want that done is they don't want their handling of the crisis scrutinized.
All right, Mr. Virani, let me get you to weigh in on that.
So I'll politely rebut that. In terms of taking the politics out of it, opening it up into a partisan forum where you have multiple parties represented would actually politicize the process. So that's the first point. The second point is that we've already held and been holding China to account for some of the very significant concerns that Mr. O'Toole's motion raises. Well, I'll give you a couple of examples, Erin. First of all, at the Foreign Committee, Standing Committee, we've had Chinese officials there speaking to things like religious freedom, including the cause of Tibetans, a cause that I'm very familiar with and advocate for regularly. Secondly, the Subcommittee for International Human Rights, we've had an expose study, which is probably the best done by any Western parliament, on the Uyghur Muslim situation. So parliamentary committees are already doing this important work in the matter of a sensitive consular case that involves the family's interest and the privacy interest and getting people back safely as quickly as possible. That's not the appropriate forum for a multi-party committee.
Mr. Harris, how do you respond to that?
Well, I think Erin made an important point, which I made in the House today, which is that if this committee, if it is approved, has to be nonpartisan to a large degree, because what we're trying to do, we have to do. This is sensitive. We know that. It can't be a political combat zone, and that's going to require a level of maturity on behalf of all parliamentarians because of the importance of this issue. So I think it should be done in this forum, but it has to be done carefully, and it cannot be a finger-pointing exercise. It has to be about looking for solutions.
All right, so in a minority parliament, how does this work now? We have a new configuration here, so even if the Liberals oppose it, Mr. O'Toole, can you actually create this committee with this motion in the House of Commons?
Well, Peter, I'm happy to predict that the first successful vote in the 43rd Parliament will be a successful Conservative Opposition Day motion with support of Jack and his party and the Bloc. And this is really just a simple examination of a major diplomatic crisis. And as Jack said, this can actually do it in a professional, serious way. Canadians will see parliamentarians working, and sensitive information, consular, 5G network, all these things that are coming up all the time can be handled in camera in a secure setting. So I think this is the way we can show Parliament is working and being serious, and let Canadians know that all parliamentarians are fighting for the Michaels. I know the government is sincere in trying to get them home. We have an obligation as well to critique the display of Mr. McCallum, the fact we had no ambassador for 8 months, the fact that we weren't responding to trade action very quickly. There are questions we need to ask, and I think this forum is better for it.
So, Mr. Virani, whether you want it or not, it sounds like it'll go ahead.
Well, it's again, Mr. O'Toole is speculating in terms of the results of the vote. I'm not going to engage in that speculation. He was also speculating earlier about how China would perceive this ad hoc committee that he's proposing to strike. We're not here to speculate. We're here to return two individuals who've been detained for over a year now. To spend a second Christmas in a prison is not acceptable. We're working hard to return them, and we're working hard on improving the Canada-China relationship.
All right, gentlemen, we'll see where all this goes. Thank you all for your time tonight. I do appreciate it. We'll follow up as soon as we see where this is headed. Thank you.
Thank you.